Whether you drive it to work or simply work to avoid it, the Capital Beltway affects just about everyone in Montgomery County. We take it for granted that this 64-mile stretch of highway is a force to be reckoned with. But how did it get here in the first place? And what was it like before it was built? Jeremy Corr is a student at the University of Maryland, where he is writing his PhD thesis on the Beltway. He says that besides improving local traffic congestion, the Beltway was built for reasons of national security.
In 1952, the U.S. Senate was convinced to fund the Capital Beltway because it would provide an escape route in the event of an enemy attack, which is somewhat amusing when you think about anyone trying to get out of town today on the Beltway in the case of an attack.
As the route for the Beltway was planned, Montgomery County was affected more than other jurisdictions.
Montgomery County was the anomaly for the Beltway because almost all the other sections of it, except for Alexandria and Virginia, were not developed at that point. Montgomery County, the suburbs, had developed by the mid-1950s, but there was nowhere else for the Beltway to go. And so it was pigeonholed into backyards behind communities in the Forest Glen area, through Kensington, through Cabin John.
Some homes were displaced. The family of former county executive Neal Potter was one of them. They were shocked by the rapidity of the process.
I guess we've been sort of unaware of it. It had been on the master plans to be more or less circular and to cut through the western edge of Cabin John and cross through a wooded area downstream, down Rock Run from us. And so it would be noise, but no other trouble really. But one day a man from the State Roads Commission came by and said, we're going to need this for the Beltway and we'd like to take it over in 30 days.
It actually took 2 years to acquire the land, but this interchange at Clara Barton Parkway is where the Potter farm once stood. The Beltway took nearly all of their 35 acres.
This is an aerial photograph of the farm before the Beltway. This is the farm. This is MacArthur Boulevard. This is the canal. And this is our farm. There's a farmhouse, farm buildings. And here is a beautiful Locke House on one of the locks of the canal, which was wiped out too. They put the Beltway right through our house, straight through, and straight through this beautiful Locke House, which had great historic significance, but was ignored in the design.
Surprisingly, there was relatively little opposition to the Beltway. Most people were looking forward to fulfilling the dream of improved traffic flow.
When the Beltway opened, the dream became a reality for several years in terms of traffic. The people who drove on the Beltway in its first few years, 1964, 65, 66, generally saw improved traffic conditions. There was nothing like the volume of traffic that we have now in the early 21st century. However, the people who live near the Beltway were angry, upset. They hadn't imagined the level of sound and noise pollution, let alone air pollution, which could come out of this type of highway because the area hadn't had this type of highway before.
Lisa Laughlin and her family moved into their Forest Glen home in 1960. At that time, it backed up to an idyllic setting.
I consider it the most beautiful place on earth. We had, the backyard sloped downhill to where the woods came up. It was a really beautiful area. It was quiet. There were so many birds. It was incredible. And we had the bunny rabbits, and the deer would come by occasionally. It was just a very peaceful, beautiful place to be.
The peace and quiet, however, rapidly disappeared when the Capital Beltway opened nearly 25 yards from their back door.
Having the Beltway as a neighbor, it's kind of like living in a war zone. You stay in your house, you close the windows, you close the doors, you forget that there's anything outside. So you become very, very introverted, whether you want to be or not.
Some residents were able to influence how this road was built. The stretch between Rockville Pike and Georgia Avenue features many twists and turns and is known as the Rollercoaster.
There are several reasons for the unusual design of the roller coaster section, but the key factor behind those many curves is that the engineers and draftsmen designing that section back in the mid-1950s continued to take pressure, political pressure, from people who lived in that area, who phoned their political representatives in the US Congress and said, you cannot send the Beltway through my backyard, you cannot send the Beltway through these trees which are long-standing in Rock Creek Park, you must reroute it. And so the engineers added curve after curve after curve as political accommodation, not strict engineering design, but for political reasons.
When the Beltway was built, it was touted as the modern solution to traffic congestion. However, opening day festivities foreshadowed what was to come.
Between 1957 and 64, bits and pieces of the Beltway opened to traffic. But in August of 1964, the ribbon was finally cut for the entire Beltway. It was at the New Hampshire Avenue interchange on the Montgomery County, Prince George's County line. Dignitaries had gathered, and Governor Tawes cut a ribbon after Federal Highway Administrator Rex Whitten made a speech. And as soon as Governor Tawes cut that ribbon, there ensued a 20-minute traffic jam, gridlock along the whole Beltway, which took police officers quite a while to clear up, and envisioning what would happen for decades to come.